Have you ever wondered why society fears the very stage of life that should be celebrated as humanity's greatest achievement? The moment when a lifetime of experience ripens into wisdom, when the soul finally becomes ready to flower. In this episode, Osho shares his deepest wisdom on getting old. If these are the kinds of exploration that call to your soul, consider subscribing to this channel. We are dedicated to diving deep into the greatest minds of human history. Now, without any further delay, let's listen to Osho's wisdom from his own perspective. I watch the lines deepen on my face in the morning mirror, each wrinkle a map of laughter and tears, of meditation and celebration, of all the moments when consciousness touched itself through this temporary form called body. These lines tell stories that youth could never understand, mysteries that only time can reveal to those who remain awake during their own becoming. Your culture treats aging as disease, something to be hidden, denied, reversed through desperate interventions that betray a fundamental misunderstanding of existence itself. You inject chemicals beneath your skin to freeze time, as if the river of life could be convinced to flow backward toward its source. This desperate clinging reveals the poverty of a civilization that has lost touch with the sacred dimension of human development. Old age is being treated like a mistake nature made, an error that medical science must correct, a punishment to be endured rather than a gift to be received with open arms. The cosmetic industry thrives on this fear, selling illusions of eternal youth to people who have forgotten that youth was never meant to be permanent. It was meant to be preparation for something far more valuable. I speak to you now from the perspective of someone who has crossed the threshold your society dreads, who has entered the territory that advertising executives tell you represents failure, decline, irrelevance. Let me share what I have discovered in this forbidden land. Old age is the culmination of everything consciousness has been working toward since the moment of birth. Most human beings move through life horizontally, accumulating experiences like possessions stored in warehouses they will never visit again. They journey from childhood to youth, to middle age to old age, on a flat plane where each stage simply replaces the previous one without transformation or deepening. This horizontal movement is merely growing old, aging in the biological sense, where the body deteriorates while consciousness remains at the same shallow level it occupied in youth. These people reach 70 or 80 having learned nothing essential, having missed the entire point of their existence. They become bitter, frightened versions of their younger selves, clutching at fading memories like drowning swimmers, grasping at debris. There exists another possibility, a vertical dimension that most people never discover because society provides no maps for this interior journey. When consciousness moves upward through each stage of life, old age becomes synonymous with wisdom, the glory and beauty that can only emerge from a life lived with awareness. This vertical movement requires that you remain present to your own experience, that you extract the lesson hidden within each joy and sorrow, that you allow life to sculpt your consciousness the way water shapes stone over centuries. Each decade becomes a classroom where existence teaches increasingly subtle truths to students willing to pay attention. The difference between these two paths, horizontal aging and vertical growth, determines whether your final years become torture or treasure. One path leads to fear, regret, and desperate clinging to what is already gone. The other path leads to freedom, gratitude, and the flowering of consciousness that makes every previous stage seem like mere preparation. Youth possesses energy, enthusiasm, the intoxicating sense that all possibilities remain open and infinite time stretches ahead. These gifts create the momentum needed to engage with life, to build and create and explore the world's offerings. Yet youth also carries the burden of not knowing what truly matters, of mistaking intensity for depth, of confusing activity with accomplishment. As the body gradually releases its grip on physical vitality, something else begins to emerge for those who have been traveling vertically through their decades. The frantic doing that dominated earlier years gives way to profound being, the quality of simply existing with such presence and awareness that existence itself becomes celebration. Old age teaches what youth could never learn, that life's deepest satisfactions have nothing to do with accumulation, achievement, or external validation. The security you spent decades chasing reveals itself as illusion. The relationships you manipulated and controlled slip through your fingers like water. The reputation you carefully constructed crumbles like ancient parchment. Everything you thought you possessed turns out to be on loan, borrowed for a season before being returned to the universe from which it came. This letting go, when approached with awareness rather than resistance, becomes the most liberating experience available to human consciousness. Each thing you release creates space for something more essential to emerge. Each attachment you dissolve reveals the freedom that was always present beneath the layers of clinging and identification. In youth, you believe more is better. More possessions, more experiences, more relationships, more achievements. The accumulation feels like progress, like successfully navigating the game of existence. You fill your life with objects and obligations until there's no space left for the silence in which wisdom speaks. Old age invites you to reverse this process, to begin subtracting rather than adding, to discover what remains when everything unnecessary has been stripped away. This process of simplification is not loss. It's clarification, like removing mud from a stream until the water runs clear and you can see all the way to the bottom. I have watched people in their final decades release possessions they once considered essential, friendships that were always superficial, beliefs that never served their evolution, identities that were always costumes rather than truth. Each release brings lightness, like setting down heavy luggage you've been carrying across vast distances without remembering why. The person who reaches old age traveling the vertical path discovers they need almost nothing to be completely fulfilled. A quiet room, simple food, perhaps a few beloved books, the company of consciousness itself, these become sufficient for profound contentment. Meanwhile, those traveling horizontally desperately accumulate more, always hoping the next possession or experience will finally bring the satisfaction that continues to elude them. Your culture's obsession with physical youth reveals a deep confusion about the relationship between body and consciousness. You treat the body as if it were you, identifying so completely with this temporary vehicle that its inevitable aging feels like personal failure rather than natural process. I have learned to witness my own body's transformation with the same detached interest a scientist brings to observing any natural phenomenon. The knees that once allowed hours of meditation now require cushions and frequent adjustment. The digestion that once processed anything becomes selective and sensitive. The energy that once lasted days now requires careful management and frequent rest. These changes are the body's way of teaching consciousness its final lessons before the two-part ways. Physical limitation forces you to turn inward, to discover resources that have nothing to do with muscular strength or sensory acuity. Pain becomes a meditation teacher more effective than any human guru, demanding presence and acceptance in ways that pleasure never does. The beauty of old age lies partly in this forced inwardness, this natural withdrawal from external engagement that creates ideal conditions for spiritual ripening. Society sees withdrawal as decline, yet for the aware person it becomes voluntary retreat, like a fruit that stops reaching outward and begins the internal process of ripening into sweetness. Youth lives haunted by death, trying desperately to ignore the inevitable ending that shadows every beginning. This denial requires enormous energy, creating an undercurrent of anxiety that colors every experience. You build empires of distraction to avoid confronting the one certainty that unites all living beings. Old age offers the opportunity to make friends with death, to sit with it like a companion whose presence no longer triggers panic. When you've lived enough decades, watched enough friends cross that final threshold, witnessed your own body's gradual dissolution, death loses its power to terrorize. It becomes simply the next event in consciousness's endless exploration of itself. I have discovered that fear of death was always fear of life, fear of living so completely that losing life would actually matter. The person who has never fully inhabited their existence naturally dreads its ending, sensing they will die without ever having truly lived. Meanwhile, the person who has squeezed every drop of awareness from each moment can approach death with curiosity rather than terror. This shift from fear to curiosity transforms old age from waiting room to meditation hall, from prison to sanctuary. Each day becomes precious specifically because you know the days are numbered, the way sunset becomes beautiful because you understand darkness approaches. Limitation creates intensity, and old age provides the ultimate limitation within which consciousness can burn most brightly. In youth, presence is difficult because so much energy flows outward, toward ambition, desire, future building, the endless projects through which you hope to prove your worth. Meditation requires fighting against this natural outward flow, swimming upstream against powerful currents of biological and social programming. Old age reverses these currents without effort. The world naturally releases its grip as you age, requiring less from you, expecting less from you, finally allowing you to simply be without the pressure to constantly become something other than what you are. This release creates perfect conditions for the flowering of consciousness that all spiritual practices aim toward. I have watched people in their 70s and 80s who never formally meditated suddenly begin experiencing states that yogis spend decades trying to achieve. The body's slowdown creates mental slowdown, and within that slowness, awareness finds space to expand beyond its usual boundaries. Thoughts arrive less frequently, leaving gaps of pure consciousness between them. These gaps gradually widen until consciousness recognizes itself as the background against which all thoughts appear. The freedom of old age lies in this natural movement toward presence, this organic meditation that emerges when you stop resisting life's final stage and begin exploring it with wonder. You discover that the silence youth avoided contains the answers youth was seeking through noise. The most revolutionary act available to an aging person is refusing to accept society's narrative about old age as decline, irrelevance, burden. This rebellion requires courage equal to any youthful revolution, perhaps greater courage because it stands alone against nearly universal conditioning. I advocate for old people to reclaim their power, to recognize that they carry something precious the young desperately need, perspective born from decades of living, wisdom extracted from countless mistakes, the calm that comes from having weathered many storms. The elderly should take aging as a challenge, proving through their own lived experience that old age can become tremendously beautiful rather than miserable. This means refusing to become invisible, continuing to engage with life on your own terms rather than society's terms, maintaining passionate interest in existence even as the body's passions fade. It means becoming elder in the true sense, someone whose presence enriches the community, whose words carry weight earned through decades of attention, whose very being demonstrates what human consciousness can become when given sufficient time to ripen. The tragedy of modern culture is that it warehouses its elders, hiding them away as if accumulated wisdom were shameful rather than sacred. Ancient cultures knew better, recognizing that a society disconnected from its elders loses access to the very wisdom needed for collective evolution. As I move through these final seasons of physical existence, I discover that everything I taught about meditation, awareness, and spiritual transformation becomes easier to embody. The theories and techniques that required effort in youth now unfold naturally, like flowers opening to morning sun. Old age reveals itself as the stage of life when consciousness can finally graduate from student to master, when all the lessons learned through decades of practice integrate into effortless wisdom. The person who reaches this stage, having traveled vertically through each previous stage, discovers they have been climbing a mountain whose peak now comes into view. From this vantage point, the entire journey makes sense. The struggles that seemed meaningless at the time, the losses that felt unbearable, the confusion that dominated certain decades. Each experience reveals itself as necessary preparation for the consciousness you have become, like individual brushstrokes that seemed random until you step back far enough to see the complete painting. This is what your death-denying culture misses entirely, that human life follows a natural arc from potential toward fulfillment, from seed toward flowering, from unconscious participation in existence toward fully awakened presence. Old age is not life's failure, it's life's triumph, the moment when everything consciousness has been working toward finally becomes possible. In these later years, I have come to understand that the question I posed at the beginning finds its answer in recognizing that aging and awakening are synonymous for those who remain conscious throughout the journey. Every moment you've lived has been preparing you for the moment you inhabit right now. Every joy trained your capacity for gratitude. Every sorrow deepened your compassion. Every failure taught humility. Every success revealed the emptiness of external achievement. The wrinkles society wants you to hide are actually medals of honor, evidence that you've lived fully enough for life to leave its marks upon you. The solution to society's fear of aging is not better cosmetics or advanced medicine or elaborate distractions from mortality. The solution is transformation of consciousness, learning to value depth over appearance, wisdom over vitality, being over doing. When humanity learns this lesson, old age will reclaim its rightful place as the crown jewel of human experience. The body may age, but consciousness, that eternal witness watching the aging, remains forever young, forever fresh, forever capable of wonder at this mysterious dance of existence.